Hey everybody, it's Tim from Linessa Farms Specialty and Heirloom Livestock. Thanks for joining us again today. So we're excited to have everybody here. You know the deal. If you guys have any questions, make sure you ask in the chat and we will go from there. So we talked to Chris and Aaron Crider before. If you haven't seen that interview, make sure you check that out. We will have that in the description below. We had a really good talk. So Chris and Aaron actually raise sheep for market. They actually have a pretty good business going on where they actually take their lambs and they sell them at local markets in their area. And so our last interview was talking about that, you know, with the keeping within the spirit of lambing, and kind of getting into that time of year right now. I wanted to bring them back to just kind of talk to us about their lambing process. I know you guys hear from me a lot and you hear what I do, but what I do is not necessarily gospel. And so it's always nice to get someone else's input and get their ideas and kind of see what they do. You can get some comparing and contrasting. I know some of you raise goats, but essentially, and we'll talk about this when we get Aaron and Chris on with us here in just a second, you know, a lot of it's the same. A lot of these ruminants, you know, you have some nutritional differences between sheep and goats, but ultimately, you know, from birth to weaning, the process is going to be very similar, especially if you're raising for commercial. You know, you're going to have the birthing process. You're probably going to have some kind of creep or nutritional process. You're going to go through some growing pains. You're going to go through the weaning process and head on out from there. So without further delay, I'm going to bring Chris and Aaron on. Hi, folks. How are you tonight?
Good.
Awesome. So you guys are over in, would you call it Central Illinois?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay. So yeah, I guess you're a little bit closer to the Indiana line than you are to the west side of the state, but you're pretty darn, as far as north and south is concerned, you're pretty darn close to being central, right?
Yeah, we're only about an hour and a half from the Indiana line.
Okay. All right. So temperature-wise, you guys are dealing with about the same thing we are right now, 20s. You're kind of in the 20s? Okay.
Chores wasn't fun this morning.
No.
So tell us a little bit about, just kind of take me back to how this got started to where you started selling at the local markets, and kind of how long have you been doing this and how is it working out for you?
Yeah. So as you know, Tim, I've always had sheep and brought the wife into it, and we really started on that farmers market here this last summer. We've done a lot of off-farm sales to ethnic people, and we tried the grocery store thing one time, and then we had two kids, so my wife decided to stay home, and we tried the farmers market this last year, and really it's been a good thing for us, and a big learning thing. But so we haven't been doing it, I guess, as long as you might think.
So when you switched over to selling at the local farmers markets, what was that experience like? Would you say that it ended up better? Aaron, would you say, like, going into it, I'm sure you had expectations, right? So would you say things went better than you thought they were going to, or worse, or what do you think?
So going into it, we kind of had like low expectations because you never really know how lamb's going to sell. And then each Saturday, the product was selling more and more and more. And so it was, so we did better than we even imagined. And we were taking lambs like to know a meat locker like every 2 weeks.
Oh wow.
Yeah.
So Chris, did you have a moment of like panic at some point where you like?
Actually we did, because like the first weekend that we went, we sold like 50 items the first week, and we're like, oh yeah, this is good. Then we sold like 80 items the second weekend. And we're like, oh, this is nice. And then the third weekend it just like blew up. And we sold like two and a half lambs worth in one Saturday. You're like, oh, I don't think we have enough. And then
how did you guys decide how you were going to break down the lambs to sell them. Like how did you decide? I guess how did you decide, and what are your big sellers? What sells good? What doesn't sell?
Well, first, I guess we decided we wanted to keep our product list very simple. I know, like when I've gone to farmers markets before, and you got this long list of items, it's kind of overwhelming from a consumer standpoint.
Sure.
You're like, do I try this or I try that? But Erin can go into like what products and what went the best because she's the one that did the work.
So we try to have ground lamb and chops. So we're probably like our top sellers. And then we also wanted to do something kind of different that like no one heard of, and we did lamb brats.
Okay.
And so that was actually very popular too, because no one ever heard of lamb brats, and we had like pepper, cheese, and jalapeno, so like different kind of flavors to try.
And then we had in shoulder steaks and some lamb sticks later in the season.
So do you have a magic kind of a happy weight that you're looking for when you're taking for your products and for what you sell? Do you have what weight are you looking at? What works best for you?
Well, I like that lamb that's around 115 pounds. We probably lose a little bit on your ground lamb, probably that you would get with a 140 pounder, but I kind of like that 115 pound lamb.
How long is it taking you to get from birth to slaughter? How long is it taking you to hit 115 pounds roughly?
Somewhere between 90 and 120 days.
Okay. So you're coming out at,
we're trying to push.
You're averaging a pound a day.
Trying to.
Okay.
It's not always guaranteed.
Okay. So let's talk about breeding. When it comes to your ewes, are you running different breeding flocks throughout the year? So you constantly have lambs, or do you have one major lamb crop a year? What's your strategy on that?
So we've really started out as just one major, and we're changing that slightly. We'll have two different lambing groups this year. We'll have a lambing group here in December and January, and then a later one in March and April.
Okay. So tell me about that. What caused that to happen?
Well, so our original flock is just kind of white and black face, and we cross. It's just a cross of black and white to get speckles. And then that second group, we are planning. They're a polypay, and we're going to breed the Dorpers on them, and then that will. And we're breeding Dorpers on the existing group too, but I guess that's our goal of where we're going to hit that 115 and be finished weight.
Okay, so that was the question we had from Joaquin here was, what breed are you doing? So ultimately the goal is going to be you're breeding Dorper sires on polypay ewes.
So basically we want to have that F1 cross. My experience is if I just, for the commercial side, Dorper on Dorper, I think the frame just gets too small and they finish out at that 80, 90 pound weight. Mm-hmm. And if I, in my past, breeding them on polypay crosses, I get that 115 and they'll be finished out at that 115, 120, somewhere in there. Some of them will be smaller, some of them will be bigger.
How does so I know for a lot of us that are producing, the real eye catcher of the Dorper is just, the musculature, but specifically in that hind saddle. You really look at that hind saddle of the Dorpers and say, wow, that's, you get a massive leg. How do you find, and then when I think polypays, I don't think that, I've seen some polypays that are a little light in the rear end. So do you find that serves well? Do you find that Dorper adds a lot of hind saddle to the?
They just add a lot of natural thickness. The only downfall I see is the Dorper typically really moderates that frame.
Okay.
And that's why we're doing the polypays to, I'm trying to find a little bit bigger framed polypays to keep the frame up there so I can get that 115 and be finished at that weight instead of being finished, as I was saying, at the 80, 90. And so the health of the hybrid vigor is also very important.
Okay, and that was the next thing I was going to say for our viewers that aren't familiar with what we're talking about. Can you talk a little bit about heterosis, the hybrid vigor, and what we're talking about when we talk about that?
Yeah, so that F1 cross is a Polypay U and a Dorper Ram on there. The hybrid vigor, I mean, they're just so healthy and they grow so fast. And I've done it. I've had Dorpers on Polypays before in the past, and they just grow really fast and easy. And I don't even actually plan on keeping any replacements. I'll probably buy replacement Polypays used to keep just getting that F1 cross, just because they're just easy keepers. I mean, they just feed out really simple.
Can you tell our viewers about the Polypay breed itself? What is a Polypay? That in and of itself is a creation, right? It's a crossbreed.
Yeah, so the Polypay is a 4-way breed cross. It is a Rambouillet, Targhee, Finn, Dorset cross. And I think it's I don't remember the exact crosses, but those are the 4 breeds involved. And so the Finn is for the number of lambs and mothering. Dorset is for mothering and muscle. Targhee is kind of for the ruggedness, and Rambouillet is kind of for the wool and the hardiness, maybe.
So it's kind of an all around. It's kind of for an all around just good. So you got the prolificacy. You got kind of a little bit of everything that's in there, right? Now, do they lend themselves a little bit easier to breeding out of season than, like, say, a blackface?
Yes. Yep. And so are the Dorpers. So the goal is to hopefully maybe have like 3 or 4 groups that lamb rear around, but we're just not there yet.
So, Aaron, when you were a kid, you weren't in sheep, right? So you married into this fiasco, right?
Yeah, I had hogs. Well, my dad was cattle for a while.
Okay.
And then I showed hogs, and then I met him, and then I'm just into the sheep now.
So raising livestock was not new to you. Just the breed was or the species was what was different.
Yeah. Yes.
What do you think about sheep? I mean, and we have a lot of people that watch our channel that maybe they were in hogs or maybe they were in cattle. What do you think about it? Like, when you compare them, do you prefer sheep? Is there something you prefer about hogs over sheep, or what do you think?
I don't know. Well, I would say hogs might be a little easier. Sheep, I'm learning they can find all the holes.
Yeah.
And they can hang themselves on anything or get stuck on anything. So you really have to watch out for them and check on them often, because they're not the smartest animals, I'm learning, but they are a lot of fun to have at a house. And our one oldest boy, he loves having them at the house. So
right,
so he loves them. So
yeah, we and kind of going back to what Chris had said earlier about you being there. I know my wife switched to working from home, I would say maybe a year and a half ago. And when it comes to lambing, having someone there, wow, that's for our viewers, that haven't gone through a lambing cycle before or a kidding cycle, like, it's a lot, in a very short amount of time. And having someone there maybe to assist you if she needs it, or just to catch something that maybe is going wrong, it really comes in handy. Or for the day that I forget to close the gate and my wife looks outside and we've got 40 sheep in our front yard. I know that would never happen at your house, but
that happens quite often.
Yeah, it's amazing. So back to the use. Do you guys synchronize your ewes? Do you utilize cedars and PG 600, or what's the process look like?
We have we've done it in the past on the synchronization. We have not done it lately.
Okay.
Our synchronization is basically it's all natural breeding. We do flush the ewes. I try to flush the ewes 2 to 3 weeks before we put the ram in, and then put the ram in one day, take them out, and then for 60 to 90 days. So like right now, we put our polypay group. They'll have them in for a little over 60 days, and then we'll pull.
Okay. Do you use marking harness or anything to tell when they're marked or no?
We
Well,
have
yeah.
since we changed breeds. So we used to have Columbias. So I've just been too cheap to buy a new marking harness. Dorpers are much smaller than Columbias.
Right.
And so we just kind of naturally observe. Luckily, we've had 2 very aggressive bucks, so it's not hard to follow along.
Anatomically, with that big of a difference, are your ewes having to squat for the Dorper bucks or not too much? I mean, are they able to land them no problem?
The first 2 Dorper bucks that we had last year, they were having to squat on some of the bigger ewes, but I haven't seen that issue this year. Have you, Aaron?
No, but our a couple of our groups are kind of ewe lambs, and so they're not like too big.
Okay.
So,
are you guys running black face or black-headed Dorpers, or are you running white-head Dorpers, or
blacks only?
So what I'm trying to picture, so a polypay is a white wool sheep, and then you've got a black-headed Dorper male on them. What should when our viewers are trying to like mentally picture what these babies are looking like? Is it just a mix mash of lots of stuff, or what are they usually looking like?
Well, we had a couple, like last year, mostly all of them had like the black face. Most of them had like the black face.
Some of them were black,
yeah,
some
and
of
then
them were
like
white with spots.
Some had
some
spots
looked like
over.
Holstein cows.
Yeah.
It's kind of fun to see what comes out.
Are you getting any solid whites, or they're all getting some coloring on them pretty much?
Most of the time it's color.
Yeah.
Only maybe 1 or 2 of those was white, but they still had a spot on them.
Gotcha.
We also cleaned up with non-Dorper bucks this year.
Gotcha.
We haven't had very good luck health-wise.
So walk me through the birthing process on your farm. Are you guys using lambing pens for your moms and babies? What's kind of the breakdown of, you got pregnant ewe, she gets ready to have her baby, from the time she has her baby, like what's the process that you do with the babies and the mom, and how does all that work?
So we've got the moms in drop pens. We try to monitor the groups. We got them broken into 3 groups, and we try to monitor them very closely. We know kind of which pens just based upon when the ram's put in. And so when they drop, we put them in the jug for 24 to 48 hours, depending on health and how lamb's doing. And then we always make sure as soon as that lamb drops that we break the wax in the teats, and we make sure that mom has milk. And if she does, we most of the time manually tube, unless we weren't out there in time and we know the belly's full in the lamb. So we make sure they at least get 1 full tube in them of milk.
Okay, great. So you just hit a ton of good stuff that I want to talk about. And a lot of people may not know what they may be like, okay, what the heck are these people talking about? So a drop pen. So explain to our viewers, you have general population, then they go into a drop pen, and from a drop pen, they go into a jug. So what is a drop pen, and how do you decide when they go from general population into this drop pen?
I would say observation of the ewe. You can see them pushing, or if you know that, sometimes we can write down if the ewe is when it was serviced just by visual. So we'll put it in a pen, and we check bags too to kind of see how far they're along. But basically, if it's cold out, we're locking them in every night, and then checking them multiple times a day in the pen. And if we see mucus or a lamb sticking out, we'll get them in, or we'll watch to observe if they need assistance.
Okay, so they go into this drop pen, and how big is a drop pen, and how many ewes can you safely put in a drop pen, would you say, on your farm?
So right now we have our groups all broken kind of in 25 to 30 head groups, so we don't really have to sort them off.
Okay.
And they all have the ability to be locked inside. And I would say our pens there are probably 20 by 50 or
Okay.
30 by 50, depending on which one pen they're in. So
Okay.
they've got plenty of room for that number of head.
Right. I think a mistake that people make, and we try to keep people from doing it, is they have their lambing jug. So when we talk about a lambing jug, we're talking about a pen that it's just the mom and her offspring, and we allow them to bond for 24 to 48 hours. Some moms are going to be real good and take to the babies great, and then others are going to be aloof and goofballs, and they're running their babies over and everything else. But we try to tell people, they'll see that their ewes going to have a baby, and they want to put them in that lambing pen, and you don't want to put them in that jug to deliver, because they need room. They're going to be up and down and flopping around, and we don't want them crushing babies or anything else. And so I guess a couple points are, you want to make sure they're done having their babies before you put them in there. It seems like once a year, maybe one will surprise me. Like, I think she's all done and she's got a triplet up in there or something weird.
I get that wrong all the time.
Right. But walk us back to, she's had the baby, and now talk to us about stripping the teats, why that is, and what are you doing there? And are you hand milking them to see if they've got colostrum, or what are you doing?
So they've had their lamb. We get them in the jug, make sure they're warm, breathing, all that good stuff. Some of them are already up and sucking, depending on most of the polypigs. They're so easy keeper. They're usually already up sucking within 30 minutes. But we break that teat because that wax can be really built up on some of them older ewes or even some of the young ewes. And so break that loose so the lamb can have easy access to milk. We always try to assist the lamb first to see if some of them are quick suckers and some of them are not.
Right.
But I learned at college how to feel the belly, see if it's full or has any milk in it. If it doesn't, we make sure it gets that colostrum, because in the first 12 hours, that colostrum is pretty darn important.
Right. And so we've gone to the process of tubing babies, and I know a lot of people just shudder at the thought of tubing. It's one of those things, once you get used to it, it's not a big deal. And my thoughts are, and tell me what you guys think about this. So I like the idea of tubing our lambs and our kids, and the reason for that is it seems that if left to their own devices, you'll usually have one lamb that's born first, and by the time she's even delivering that second one, that first one can be up and nursing, or you can get a really healthy one and one that's maybe a slightly slower, and it'll get nudged out. So you've got this disproportionate amount of one's getting too much colostrum, one's not getting enough. Where when we milk them out, we can split that colostrum up. We know we've got an even amount. We tube both of them. We know they have enough in them to survive, at least for a short amount of time, hours actually. And then we can put them in and kind of move on and go from there. Essentially, is that kind of what you're looking at?
Yeah, I think you hit it on the head. Yeah. I mean, we wanted to make sure they just have a great start. So we make sure they have a full belly, they're happy, and then I think that's the best start for them. And then you find out who the keepers and who are going to be the high labor. Now, the other thing is, if they have more than two, we often try to take the third one off. It's just too hard on those sheep.
Great. So talk to me. That's a great point. So talk to me about, now we're getting into bottle feeding and grafting and stuff like that, right? So I guess let's talk about bottle feeding for a minute. Let's step back and talk about that. Do you end up with bottle babies? And if you do you will you let a lamb go, or do you try your best to keep them going? Or Aaron, how do you deal with that? If you've got a baby that's born and it's a little slow, What do you do?
We try our best. We've been lucky enough that we've only had like a couple of bottle babies in the last couple of years.
We've had luck grafting here and there. So grafting's all about timing for me. If you have another ewe that's lamb the day before and you have the afterbirth there, sometimes you can convince it. I think it also depends on the ewe. I've got a handful of just great old ewes that if I cover them in the afterbirth, I mean, they'll take them. They'll take them 2 days later, which is always amazing. But it's that it doesn't always work. So sometimes I put them in a head cage first and try that for a couple of days. And if that doesn't work, we'll put back to the bottle. And usually we've been pretty lucky. Handful of bottle lambs. They just take a lot of time and a lot of milk. We try to get them started on feed as fast as possible.
Right. And we've got a video coming up soon about bottle babies. And I will tell you guys, and I'm sure this is no surprise, we get a lot of people that get suckered into getting bottle babies. We get a lot of maybe first time people, and they think, oh, this is a cheaper way for me to get started and it's going to be fun and I'm going to do this. And then they get these bottle babies and they find out they're not thrifty. They've got health problems. It's expensive. It's to feed them correctly. It's very time consuming. We've got some tricks that we figured out doing cold pail feeding and stuff like that. But I think grafting is the way to go. So with that being said, talk to our viewers about grafting, and really this is something you can do with sheep or goats. The process is the same, but explain to someone that doesn't know anything about grafting, what does the process look like, and ideally, how do you make this happen?
It's much easier if you lamb your groups of ewes in a tight window. So this year may not be as good as in the past for us. Well, a lot of times in the past, we'd run 3 or 4 rams with the group all at once so we can get everybody lamb in that same 30-day window. And so when we're grafting, you got this lamb over to the side, you got to pull, and you hope you got another one that only has a single, or if it's a really good ewe that can handle 3, you take the afterbirth that it lost or from the lamb that did lamb, and you just rub that lamb vigorously in that afterbirth, because it's all smell bang, in my opinion, unless it's just a good old ewe, because some good old ewes will just take anything.
Right.
But get them that smell, and then I rub them up and down, necks, legs, heads. You cover that in, and they smell it. And you even put that afterbirth between them and the lamb. You can sometimes fool that ewe into taking it. But like I said, I just have sometimes it's really hard if I have 2 ewes that drop lambs in the same pen, because I get them mixed up all the time because they're both taken after those lambs.
Right.
That's more of my challenge than grafting, honestly. Because I don't know how many times last year my wife's like, yeah, you got them with the wrong ones.
We've done that. I've done that before too. I'm like, I think maybe 3 or 4 years ago on Christmas Eve, we came out in the morning and had something like 12 ewes delivering at the same time. And so then it's like, we were just splitting the babies up. We're like, you get 2, you get 2, you get 2. And like, everybody's happy, everybody's nursing. And we're like, okay, and then you've got some moms that maybe they're new, maybe this is their first time, and they're completely aloof and they don't want to have anything to do with that baby. So Aaron, what do you do if you see a mom that you're just like, oh no, because when you see it, right? You're like, oh no. So what do you do? What's the process look like to deal with that?
Well, I usually get him because he's the expert.
I don't know about that. There's usually some choice words before she gets them.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. A lot of times I find that the lambing jug cures it to a certain degree, as long as the mom's not being violent with them. But
usually what do you think? In a head
Yeah.
shoot, right, Aaron?
Yeah, probably, because I don't really handle when like the moms beat on the babies, like I
Right.
just take the babies and hold them because I don't like that.
Right.
But so we usually like tie them up like a halter, just so like the baby could eat, or
Right.
or like lock them up.
Very few
but-
VARs will fight
Yeah.
if we tie them up or lock them up in the head chute. You know, some of them will be dumb and lay down, but very few of them will put up a fight much after you lock them up.
I'm kind of getting ahead of myself, but I think it warrants bringing up now. You know, towards the end of my list here, I had culling written down, but you know, that's where this really, these problems fix themselves is when it comes to culling. And you know, I think it's underappreciated that when you get these moms that are poor milkers or poor moms or whatever, like they got to go. Like that's time, that's money. But I tend to give mine a kitchen pass maybe the first year if they're a little aloof. How do you deal with that?
Well, if they're ewe lambs, we're kind of the same way.
Yeah,
We'll
we
give them
keep
a
it
pass
there.
the first year.
But-
I'll be honest. I guess from my experiences, you got to start with a good set of ewes from a reputable breeder that knows what they're doing. I don't know how many groups I've bought, and I'm like, oh, I've got this group for steal. And then when I get to Lambington, I'm like, I understand why
Right.
this is a steal. Because you got problems at birthing, because they've not been fed right, or they're just a pain, or they're an older group of ewes that have their own other issue. So I think it goes back to making sure you have the right base, and you just got to determine what your management style is.
Yeah.
Everybody's different.
Yeah.
I'm not saying that lambing and jugs, and I'd say we're probably pretty high maintenance at lambing time, but is that right for everybody?
Yeah. And we also keep like notes, like if like the mom had the baby dry, and so like we can go like back a couple of years, like, oh, this one's always been a bad mom. Let's just get rid of her, or she always loses her lambs. Let's just get rid of her.
Right. And that's where those medical records come in, and that they're so important. Is, you know, when you go into the culling process, if you're doing it right, I think, you know, you got to be looking at the paperwork too. Like, okay, what's the performance? What's it look like? How are they doing? Because I can't remember, you know, and I've got some of my favorites out there that I just like. I'm like, oh, she's great, and she may not be, you know. The other thing I have noticed is I've noticed that sometimes my wilder moms, my more like skittish moms, actually have better mothering ability than my moms that are a little like happy to see you, within reason. Now, if I got moms that are complete spazzes, you know, they're not usually good, but it seems like, you know, it amplifies their existing behavior when they have that baby. If they're, you know, protective and inquisitive and they pay attention when they have that baby, they're usually going to be that way. If they're just kind of like happy to be there, you know, it seems like they can kind of be aloof with the babies. I don't know. Some of that's breed too, though, right, Chris? I mean, some sheep are well known for being good mothers, and some are not.
Yeah, that's kind of like why the polypays use the Dorsets in there, because that's just mothering ability. They always have been known for their mothering ability.
Right. And we started our current flock. Our base ewes were Dorset and Columbia, and then we brought in some other breeds, and it was like wow. You know, jumping from you know, we got some more club lamb body style blackface ewes that came in, and I was like, it was like night and day. So we got some questions here. Let's see what we have. So, do you have to watch how much lambs drink when bottle feeding, like you do with goats?
Yes, you can't overfeed them. You know, like when they're less than a week old, we're feeding them probably 8 ounces every 4 hours.
Right.
And then once they get over a week old, you almost double that, and then you kind of just you manage from there. Like when we put them on the bottle after a week old, when you get after 2 weeks old, they kind of manage it themselves. We kind of give them free choice.
Okay. So I can imagine the same thing with us. Well, let's answer this other question here real quick. So how are the ewes being moved while in the birthing process? Do you hand walk them? Do you use herding dogs? What do you guys use to move the moms?
So we hand walk them because our drop. So we have our jugs on shop, and then drop a pit just right next to it, and so we just like open the door and walk them in.
Oh, so that's nice. So your drop pen's right there by the lambing jugs.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. And we've kind of got it set up so it's just kind of friendly. Like they kind of know the paths that we do, and we have a couple foldable gates out in the drop pen if we know it's a more challenging mother, or you're trying to, like, sometimes if you've got 3 or 4 moms out there dropping or at the same time, you can kind of pin them off in the drop pen until you can get them sorted out.
So we're using utterly easy. We use the hand pump milker. I mean, back in the day, I used to take a 60 ml syringe and cut the end off, flip it upside down, and suck the milk out that way. What are you guys doing for milking? How are you milking your ewes out?
I never had very good luck with the utterly ease. All hand.
Okay.
Which, like I said, we're probably a little high maintenance compared to most people. And, that's one thing where we go back on the selection process. Some of them are easy milking and some of them aren't. And that's something we watch very closely is quality of milk. And that's a nutrition thing too, but you can kind of tell who your good milkers are, and we make notes on that. And then, like, if a ewe has a single, we almost always take an extra 8 ounces and freeze it in case you've got a ewe with problems, and then you can thaw that out and feed that to make sure they get that colostrum.
So talk to our viewers about handling colostrum. So the babies have to have the colostrum within the first 24 hours. For the people that don't, if you don't know this, and I know, Chris, you know this, and Aaron, you know this, but the baby's gut is set up to absorb those immunoglobulins in a small window of time. Once that window of time has passed, they can't absorb what they need as far as the antibodies are concerned from the colostrum. So if you're getting a baby that's, let's say, 2 or 3 days old and it hasn't had any colostrum, like, you're done. It's not, you've missed the boat on that. When you milk out that colostrum and you freeze it, tell us about warming that back up. Can you just toss it in the microwave, or how do you got to do this?
No, you don't put it in the microwave. So what we do is we just get really hot water and put it in a bowl, and then we put our colostrum in like a Ziploc baggie, and then we put that in the bowl, and it will thaw itself out in a minute, 30 seconds to a minute and a half, depending on how long it's been in the freezer. But that's how we do it. We just add hot water until it thaws out.
Right. And that's important for people to know. You
don't want to microwave it.
No, you just kill everything that's good in there, and you go from there. So we had a question about, so do you test the milk for colostrum, or do you use a refractometer? So sheep and goat milk is homogenized, and we know when we're getting the colostrum, it has a very specific look to it. I think the colostrum has a very specific look to it. And usually mom's got pretty good colostrum going for, what would you say, the first, I don't know if I'd say it immediately starts transitioning from colostrum to milk, to where after about a day, you don't see hardly anything, right?
I would say anything less than 24 hours, I would consider colostrum. I mean, you can tell usually has that yellow color to it, and can sometimes be a little bit thick.
Yeah.
words.
Yeah, even with some of our really, really hard milkers, especially with goats, you may even see a little bit of blood in it, and that'll usually clear up. Sometimes people freak out about that, but that is, as long as everything's looking okay, that's not completely unheard of. But yeah, I agree. I can just tell by the texture, the look of it. It's just thicker. And usually that best colostrum's right then within, I would say, 4 to 6 hours after birth, and then it slowly declines from there. Temperature wise, that's a good question. When you're getting ready to bottle feed a baby, how do you know when it's right, temperature wise?
The guess, wild guess. No, obviously, I just kind of stick my hand in the milk and kind of get a feel. You want it warm, but you just don't want it so warm that it's kind of like you're feeding a bottle to a human baby. You kind of put it on the back of your hand or on your wrist and kind of say, hey, is this too warm or too cold? You want, I mean, I think once you get past a week old, you don't have to worry so much about the temperature. But that first week, I always try to keep the milk warm.
Right. And we're the same way. Once those babies are like, especially once they're getting to like 3 weeks old, something like that, where they're just horking it down. Like, I mean, we'll sometimes even feed it to them cold just to slow them down a little, to keep them from eating it too fast. So yeah, let's kind of talk about processing lambs. So, I'll tell you what I do and then you tell me what you do. So when my babies are born, I do the old Dr. Kennedy pipestone processing where I actually give my lambs, they get 1 ml of penicillin, 1 ml of CDT mixed subcutaneously at birth. I never have any issues with navel oil or anything else. Pipestone Dr. Kennedy used to do it. It's a little antiquated. I know a lot of people get angry at me for doing it, but it works. And we spray the navels, and if I can dock and tag within the first couple days, I try to bundle my cares together, so I've got all my babies all at once, and I try to get it all done. So what does it look like on your farm from birth to, let's say, tail docking and ear tagging? What's the process look like?
Well, we tend to like to tag in and the doc if they're like healthy enough, like after 2-3 days or so. Like once we know like the lamb is healthy and it's eating and it's strong enough, and then we like to dock and tag those. When we have like a weaker lamb, we like to wait a couple more days before we like dock or tag them.
So like when they first bring them in, we do always dip them and dip their navels. And then we always do the CDT shots about 30 days before they lamb in the moms. And so I think that passes along the lambs, or hopefully it does. And then we'll hit the lambs again at maybe 30 and 90 days, typically on the CD&T.
Right. And I could do penicillin and tetanus antitoxin, because really what I'm doing is, the Clostridium, it's not doing them much good. Like you said, they should be getting passive from mom. Our thought is we're protecting them against the tetanus, and the penicillin's giving them a boost to protect them from navel oil. So really, I could just do tetanus antitoxin. It seems like sometimes, man, I can't get my hands on tetanus antitoxin, and then other times you can get it all over. So what we've found is the CDT and the penicillin, we mix it up, we give them the shot. But by all means, we just want to cover that navel and protect them from getting anything in there. To be honest with you, it seems to me like the goats really get navel ill more easily than the lambs, and I have no idea why that is. But for our viewers that may not know, like navel ill just is it just destroys their shoulders. A lot of times it's like permanent damage to them. It's nasty. And man, to be honest with you, I don't know if I've ever had it in a lamb. Have you ever had navel oil in a lamb before that you know of?
I think I've only had one or two get infections, and that's
Right.
it. But I guess it's just something that was trained in me at college is you dip them and go.
Right.
And
Right.
iodine's just so cheap, it's pretty easy to do.
Right. So back to what Aaron was talking about, and I think it's important is that, when you're gonna tag and you're gonna dock and you're gonna do any of these things to these lambs, it's important to realize that that is gonna knock them back a little. And so if you have a lamb that's not strong and maybe they're just now getting going to where they're starting to eat well, you need to understand that if you go docking that tail and tagging and doing all that stuff, it's going to knock them back a little for a day or two. And so we want to make sure that those lambs, it's always advantageous to bundle your cares together. So you're doing all your lambs at once. That's nice, but you don't want to kill them either. And so moving forward, I wanted to briefly talk about losing lambs, and you guys can relate to this. And boy, we get people really beat themselves up over this. And it's hard. I don't like it either. But every year we have lambs that don't make it for no good reason. And I don't even know sometimes. I'm like, I have no idea what's going on. Maybe they're doing great for a week and I come out and they're dead. Or they just never take off from birth. And I think this is something that happens to everybody, right? I mean, it happens to you guys. It happens to us. And would you agree that sometimes it's just like no rhyme or reason why this is happening?
It's most frustrating when they're healthy and you got them going, and then whoop, next day they're dead. It's just like, why?
Right.
I think you hit that on. I mean, you just can't beat yourself up, because I know there'll be 1 week where we're just like, man, we're doing everything right. And then the next week of lambing, it's like, man, we are the worst sheep farmers in the world.
Right. And I think with us having the numbers that we have, it still hurts really bad, because I look at that lamb and I think to myself, that's a lot of time. That's that mom from flushing to delivery. Like that's a lot of time, a lot of money. Setting aside the emotional part of it to where you're like, it just makes you feel bad. But on top of that, then you've got the economic consequences, and it is hard on the mom. You can tell the moms grieve. So I think some of our viewers, though, when they have 2 ewes, 3 ewes, they have a very small farm. Man, when you've only got 2 or 3 ewes and you have a ewe that loses babies, boy, then it really hurts. Good question. So how big are your lambing pens?
Yeah, I seen he's asked that twice. Most of them are in that 4 by 5, 5 by 6 for maybe the bigger ewes. What we've got like 4 by 10 pens that we've split in 2, so we can feed down the middle. That's kind of how we have. She said we actually got old gestation pins that her dad had for the pigs, and we just split them in 2.
Okay.
We've actually changed our setup for this year. We'll have 2 sets of 6 pins, so we'll have 12 jugs total. And so we're going to see how that goes.
How many ewes are you running? Are you expecting to have lambs?
Around 80.
Okay. And you think 12 lambing jugs is enough for you?
Some days, yes. Some days,
they're
no.
in smaller groups, and it's like the first group
will be
30,
30.
is like 30, yeah. And then all the others aren't until like after March.
Yeah, we split it up much. So we used to do like 100 at a time a couple of years ago, and that was just overwhelming.
Right.
So with the smaller group of 30 and then the group of 50, I think we could get most of them covered. And we've got some 4-foot collapsible gates that we can throw up temporary pins.
We do too. We'll have the lamb surge, and we'll have pens set up all over the place sometimes, or we're literally taking one mom and kicking her out to put the next one in. So yeah,
I think the one thing different that we'll do this year is we'll probably have like 2 4x10 or 5x10 pins that we can pull, like use lambs out of the jug pen after 2 days. The ones that are a little bit weaker need more time, or the bottle babies, so we can just have them there and it's easier, and we can watch them a little closer.
right. And you do use iodine on your navel for your navels, correct?
Yeah.
Yeah. And so do you use the cup style?
Yes. Yep.
Okay. Yep. How about heat lamps?
So we do heat lamps. If it is below, if it's above 25 degrees, I typically do not use heat lamps unless it's a real weak lamb.
Right.
If it's a weak lamb, we'll put them in under the heat lamp, and we have it so we can separate the ewe, so she can't just like lay under the heat lamp with her.
Right.
We'll separate that. But if it gets below 25 degrees, we'll try to plug in. We don't have enough for every pin, but
Right.
But for half of the pins, probably we have enough heat lamps. And then
Yeah, we use
pretty
the
protected,
Go ahead.
the heat lamp, because I don't want to burn the barn down.
Yeah, and we just did a video on heat lamps. I use the Premier ones that are enclosed. I think they're worth their weight in gold. Now, I did purchase one of the Premier carbon fiber ones, and I am not a fan. I don't know if you've worked with those or not.
No, I got the black Premier ones and old
Right.
orange one. We've what I've been doing is buying one a year because I'm too cheap to buy that many at once.
Right. Yeah, so Premier came out with a new like carbon fiber bulb. You've probably seen it. Man, you could fry an egg on them. Like you could literally light a cigarette off of them. So I'm not a fan of it. I've gotten attached to my black plastic ones and I like them. And then we use they're called thermocubes, and I'll have to send you a link for it. But you can get them. They're relatively inexpensive. It's a little thing that you plug into your outlet, and it's got a built-in thermostat right in it. And once it gets below freezing, it just kicks right on. So it's pretty slick.
So a lot of the time we'll unplug those lamps at night sometimes, just because I don't want to ever lose my barn or the sheep in the barn. So the other thing that we've done also in the past, if it's a weak lamb, we'll take like a old 30-gallon plastic drum and put a lamp in that, and we'll put 1 or 2 lambs in that so they can get warmed up.
Yeah.
And we'll even bring them in the house sometime. I don't like to bring them in the house because they lose the smell.
Right.
And then it's hard for the mom to, but sometimes you just got to bring them in the house because you're tired of being out there too.
Right. Yeah. We go to extreme lengths, probably more so than we should. I do intraperitoneal glucose injections. I think it works great. I know a lot of people don't feel comfortable doing that. But we go to extreme lengths because, like I said, it hurts, man. When you lose a lamb, like that's a lot of profit. And your profit margins are already so small that, that can make a heck of a difference. And then you're later in the season and you're having to go buy lambs from Rick Adams, and I know Rick always likes that when I come to his farm to buy animals, but I prefer to use my own, or Jeff Hunter. Jeff's closer to me than Rick. And a lot of times I'll have to call up Jeff and get some lambs. Thank God that we have people that are close to us that we can co-op with. Tell me about creep feeding. What do you think about it, and how do you do it?
So big fan of creep feeding. So basically on the creep feed, we kind of do a 2 process. Our feed mill has kind of a sweet feed that we start them on. It's kind of a crumble that's got molasses and some other stuff to make it sticky and sweet. And then it doesn't have a lot of nutritional value, but it kind of gets them started. And we mix that then with a cherry flavored 18% creep. And so I usually will put the creep out 15 to 20 days and then really push them hopefully at 30 days of age and beyond that to eat that creep.
So you're offering it to them free choice from birth to
15 days of age.
15 days. Okay.
Yep. They don't usually, and most of the time I would say that they probably don't eat very much until
right
after 25 days probably, but most of the time is I always make sure that creep area is kind of well lit, warmer.
Yep.
Always bedded a little extra, put a little hay in there.
Yep.
They may not eat it probably initially, but once you get the nice thing about doing bigger groups is once you get a handful of them started, they teach everybody else.
Right. And we do the same thing. We get like the lamb hangout place, only they can get in there. It's cushy in there, and you can tell when they hit that creep. A couple things that I've noticed is it's like a switch goes off in their head, and you come in there and they've got like brown mouth and they're just happy, and every once in a while we will see a little bit of scouring maybe for that first day or so. Just they start going nuts, and then it usually cleans itself off. A lot of people, it scares them when you say free choice. They think, oh, they're going to eat themselves to death. And I usually explain to them, I say, when they know they can get it anytime they want, they don't gorge themselves like an adult would if you just turn them loose on there. But with that being said, I think it's important to make sure you have your creep secure so the adults cannot get in there. And they do. It happens.
When you get to weaning time, that's always the biggest challenge because the thinner ewes will push their way right through. I don't care how nice you got.
I agree. I think there's always some like thinner hipped ewes or does that just no matter what I do, they can work there. I look at the creep gate and I'm like, I can't believe you can fit through here. We try to alleviate that with horizontal bars as well, but it seems like they can still get in there. So weaning, when you do you have a time frame when you look at weaning? Are you at 6 weeks or 8 weeks, or what's your thoughts on that?
So in the past, we've done a lot of lightweight lambs where we're selling them at 60 pounds. Mm-hmm. So we're between that 60 day and 75 day, we're weaning them pretty fast off of the mom to sell them. I would say that we kind of now are pushing that back a little bit, maybe closer to 90 days. And we'll start that process of we're not very good at that process, I will say. I always think I'm not very good at weaning, but with the mom, managing the mom, but we try to take them off feed or slow their consumption of grain 2 weeks out, 3 weeks out. And sometimes I feel like I'm too hard on them because we've done it where we take water away from them and we take grain away from them, and we'll take it away for 3 days and then reintroduce hay or straw. And then that's on the mother side. But on the lamb side, we don't really change anything outside of we'll start putting our lamb grower feed in probably at 60 to 90, it's between 60 and 90 days, depending on how fast that group's eating, because that creep's a lot more expensive than our grower feed.
Right. So that was a question we had here from Cheryl is, how long do you creep feed for? And I would say that's a loaded question because sometimes it depends on my breed and sometimes it depends on my target weight. How do you answer that question?
So I kind of manage it based upon the group. Sometimes if it's a big group, some of the longer, I would say we creep no longer than 90 days of age. That's a stop point. And that would say you got a group of 50 lambs, as long as, 2/3 of them are above that age group or that weight that you want to be at, I'll stop the creep feed and go straight to the lamb grower ration.
Okay. And I think that's kind of industry standard. Was 90 days is kind of the magic number that I grew up hearing was, if you're going to creep feed them, you do it to about 90 days. That cherry flavoring that you were talking about, is that an additive or is that something that your grain mill does for you?
So that's just they've got cherry flavored and some other flavor that it's a part of the pellet mix that we get.
Okay.
I don't know. It smells really nice when you feed it.
Right. I've got a butterscotch additive that I use, and it tastes. It doesn't quite taste like butterscotch, but I'm one of those guys that I like to try stuff.
Yeah.
It smells like butterscotch. if I get bottle babies and I really want to try to push them on creep soon, what I found is soybean meal sometimes for if they're itty bitty, because kind of like you said, like up to 15, 20 days, like they'll kind of nose around in it, but they're not like
They got to be that crumble size, because they just
yeah.
eat a big pellet. They're not going to take it.
Right.
That's my opinion.
So kind of rounding things out, I want to talk real quick about monitoring your ewes after weaning, looking for mastitis and any problems that you might see. And then I kind of want to round it out again, talk about culling. So when you're weaning and you've pulled those babies off, or I should say, do you move your moms and keep the babies where they're at? Is that kind of how you wean, or what's your weaning process look like?
Yeah, basically we separate, and I would say we usually keep the lambs and pull the moms. And so when we go to wean, we go through the ewes. I mean, that's also where we go back through our notes at the lambing time, and we kind of say, man, you're done, you're gone, you know, we're going to keep you another year. And then usually a couple weeks later, or when we go through the final group, we'll go through that ewe base again and say, you haven't gotten your, you know, you look like you're pretty frail, need to go, or check the bags. You kind of have an idea of who has a bad bag at lambing time.
Do you, what was I going to ask you? As far as watching for mastitis, what are you looking for on your ewes during the weaning process? What would be something that would be alarming to you?
I would say enlarged teat, always bottle teat more than mastitis. But then I just feel the bags for hardness or lumps, mainly is how I go about it. And you can I've seen the really hardcore mastitis that's infected and turns purple and all that. I mean, that's automatically for me. I've never been able to bring them back from it.
No.
So to me, it's an automatic, you're called. And then sometimes if it's a favorite show ewe, I have a handful of those left over. You kind of maybe give them a pass if it's one side of the bag, because you know, if they're your favorite, you know how that goes.
Yeah. Are you guys eyeballing replacement ewes during the, like when you're looking at your lambs?
So in the past, yes. Our plan right now is not to keep replacements. We're gonna buy replacements, but on the Dorpers, we kind of eyeball the ones we want to keep pretty fast. You kind of know after 30 days of age who's going to be the winner and who's not.
Right.
I mean,
well, it'll be interesting to talk to you in May and see if your prophecy of not keeping any replacement ewes comes true. Aaron, what do you think about that? You think that'll actually happen, or you think he'll probably keep a couple?
I don't know. Last year, I talked him into keeping 3.
See,
and so we'll see. We'll see how many.
And how many are left of those 3?
3. They're all 3 there.
Okay.
So I'm putting your information down at the bottom right now. So to learn more about your farm, people can go to www.criderfarms.com. Do you guys sell breeding stock? Where are you at with that as far as people coming out to the farm, things like that?
Right now, we're kind of in a growing phase. Our plan is, obviously, I don't know about on the commercial side that we would be selling very much, but on the Dorper side, our plan is to sell stock. We're such in a building phase right now. Our plan is kind of probably to grow over the next 5 years. I mean, we listed ourselves in the directory, but that's more just to get our name out there, and we're going to build the number up, and then we'll start offering.
What is your ultimate goal? Do you have one right now, or are you kind of figuring out your goals as you move along?
Be profitable.
Yeah.
I don't know. Our capacity right now with what we have, we probably can't get much bigger than 80 to 100 head. And that's dry lot in the commercial use a lot of the time. But we've got, 15, 20 acres of pasture that we rotate quite a bit. And so we'd like to keep a lot of those ewes on pasture as long as we can. So I would say we're going to stay in that 80 to 100.
Okay. That's fair.
range, and then probably 80 commercials and 20 to 30 Dorper ewes probably eventually.
Right, because what people don't understand too, well, some people do, some people don't think about it, is 100 ewes in a period of 2 weeks turns into 300 animals very quickly. So you may think you have room, and then all of a sudden it's like, it's out of control.
That's why we probably won't keep replacements very much, just because we don't have the space. And
Right.
And
Yeah,
I'm not one to put them on a self feeder. Kind of going back to the creep thing.
Mm-hmm.
I like freshness of feed.
Right.
We mix all of our own feed. We'll get the other than the creep is its own self pellet, but we mix all of our own feed daily, maybe and weekly depending on the weather. But to me, freshness of feed is, I learned that from an old sheep guy.
Right.
You just consume it so much better. They waste so much less.
Oh, sure.
And so freshness of feed and cleanliness there is important. Both on the
we do the same thing. We mix in batches, and they take it better. They do better. A couple questions we had real quick. What kind of feeder are you using for your creep feed? Like, I use hog feeders, the stainless steel hog feeders for my creep feeders. What are you guys using?
That's what we're using. We have old stainless steel hog feeders, and then sometimes we'll throw an old show pan in some of them,
right?
Just depending on easiness.
I'm a huge fan of the stainless steel hog feeders. I think those things they work great. They don't rust. I mean, it's hard to beat them. How about in terms of rumen health? How soon, as far as putting a lamb out on pasture or grass hay, that rumen doesn't really fully develop for a while, does it? I mean, it takes a little bit of time for that thing to get going.
Yeah. So, I mean, like all of our ewes will have free choice hay. So, I mean, they're going to have the ability to consume it.
Right.
And we've done grass-fed only lambs before, and wouldn't you agree, Aaron? They just don't take off.
No, they don't really grow as fast.
I mean, you gotta feed grain at least that first 90 to 120 days for sure.
I know a lot of people don't like hearing that. And our operation is very similar to yours. And really, I mean, you'll see lambs nibbling on hay sometimes before, I don't even think they realize what they're doing. That's just like mom's doing it, so they're doing it, But as far as really going after hay, it can take a while. We have pulled babies before. We've split up twins and put one on pasture with mom and put one on dry lot with grain, and it's just not even in the same ballpark. And I wish it was. Like, I don't feed grain because I've got some kind of emotional vested interest in it, or I mean, if I could put them on pasture, that'd be great. I'd love to save the money. But I have to meet market weights, and I can't do that when it takes twice as long, literally in some cases twice as long. It's tough to do. And to be honest, in my opinion, I think some of these breeds lend themselves to grain feeding better than others. I think if you want to see the maximum growth potential of, especially when I'm looking at Dorpers and some of these other ones, it seems like the grain really shows you what that potential is of that animal. What are some of do you have additives that you add to your creep feeds?
Ours is just a self-contained pellet that has all of it in that we just get from our local feed mill.
Right.
We've been using it for years. In the past, when we were really hardcore mixing, we would get a pre-mix from Pipestone Group,
right,
and then add. We'd do the full concoction. I don't know, that self pellet's just easy. It may be not as cheap or as affordable as doing the concocting, but who has the time to mix feed all the time? Right. And back to your raising of lambs, I think it also depends on where you're at and what resources you have. We just don't have the pasture to feed a nice group of lambs out.
Sure.
And take the time, as you said. I mean, it takes a long time to feed a grass-fed lamb.
Right.
And I'm a corn farmer, so trying to raise the value of that corn.
Sure. Yeah, and I agree. And we have some friends that are living down south, and they can run on pasture all year round, and that's great. I wish I had that. I just don't. And then as far as the feed additives, I agree. You know, we have a 40% complete pellet that we sell that has everything in it. If I'm pushing a show lamb really, really hard, I may take some additional steps to protect against urinary calculi. I may throw some limestone in the feed to up that calcium. I may put some ammonium chloride, stuff like that. But nowadays, like you said, with the feed, like our complete 40% pellet, it has ammonium chloride in it. It has the proper calcium phosphorus ratio in it. So I guess a lot of that is going to be, what do these people have in their area and what can they do, you know, to do things.
And it depends on the breed too. I think you hit that. I know the Dorper. Well, I grew up with Columbia, so you could literally feed them pail upon pail upon pail of feed, and they'd never overeat.
Right.
The Dorper, you kind of have to watch how much you feed them, because I've blown the back ends out of a few.
Okay.
Like a Columbia. So we've definitely learned on the straight Dorper that we have to be careful how much we feed them.
Awesome.
But then on the F1 crosses, you can feed them whatever. We haven't had any problems.
Gotcha. Well, that was great. We answered a lot of questions. And then the other nice thing is we were able to break it down by topic. So this video will actually get broken down into smaller videos as well. And I'll tell you, we have more people that watch this at work the next day than we do at night. So very good. Well, I really appreciate you guys coming on. Hang tight for me here, and I'll talk to you guys here in just a second, okay?
Sounds great. Thanks.
All right, everybody. So that was great. We got a lot of good questions answered. I hope you guys appreciated Chris and Aaron coming on. Again, if you want to talk to Chris or Aaron, check out their website. They are at Crider Farms. That, again, is www.criderfarms.com, and that will be in the description below. You can also see it right here. So again, by all means, they are located in central Illinois. So feel free to reach out to them if you have any questions or comments. Again, thanks for watching. Don't forget to leave a thumbs up and a comment below if you have any questions. So I am Tim from Linessa Farms, Specialty and Heirloom Livestock. Thanks for joining us again today, and I look forward to seeing all of you again next time.